Alright, so we're headed to Discount Tire here in a few minutes. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and unmount the spare wheel. That way when I get there, all they have to do is just slap on the new tire. If you haven't done this before, I highly recommend you do it at least once, because last thing you want to do is be stuck on the side of the road and not be able to figure out how to get your spare tire down. So very quick, you can see we used to have a full-size spare when we were running 265/70 R18, but now because this is a 7-inch wide steel wheel, that says 18 by 7, hopefully that can come through, but you can't mount a 35 by 12.5 on a 7-inch wide wheel. You probably could, but not a lot of places are going to do it because it's not recommended. We're going to stick to recommendations, and we're going to stick with a 295/70 R18, which is allowed to be mounted on a 7-inch wide steel wheel. Diameter wise should be close to our 35s, but that is the purpose of this video. We're going to do a comparison between a 295/70 R18 and a 35 by 12.5. Alright guys, Discount Tire is done. We got the spare tire mounted up, the 295/70 R18. Let's go ahead and go home. We'll put this on a scale and see how much it weighs, and then we'll do a size comparison between the 35s and the 295s. Alright guys, we're back home. Got the truck back in the garage. I added some light because some of you guys have complained that some of my videos are too dark, so I'm hoping this helps. I'm really curious how much air they put into this thing, because this thing feels stiff. I don't know if it's because it's the E-rate load range E compared to my load range Ds. Let me see what the load index on this is. So 129 load index compared to 118 on my 35s. So 42, so they pumped it up to about 42 PSI. I'm gonna take it down to 35. All right, so I want to do a test here, and I want to measure how tall these tires are. These are 35 by 12.5s. So it looks like this is a 34-inch tire. It's rated 35 by 12.5, but once you air it up, mount it, and put some weight on it, it's reading exactly 34 inches. And that's true pretty much for any tire. Whatever they advertise, usually it's about a ½ inch. In this case, it looks like it's an inch smaller than advertised. Toyos, BFGs generally run on the smaller side. If you go with Coopers or Nittos, generally they run true to size, or maybe a ½ inch lower than what they advertise to be. So back to the spare, again 295/70 R18, and this is mounted on a 7-inch wide wheel. I don't think that should affect diameter wise too much. Overall the tire's going to measure out. So to get you guys the most accurate comparison, I'll go ahead and unmount one of my 35s and put these things side by side. That way we'll be able to get a apples to apples comparison between the two tires with no load on them. I'm going to go ahead and flash some numbers on the screen here to make things easier to track, but I didn't show you guys on camera, but the stock steel rim and the stock tire, that came in at about 71 pounds. If we're looking at just the OEM 18-inch aluminum wheels with the same tire, 265/70 R18, those things came in at 69 pounds out the door. So about 41 pounds for the tire itself, and then about 28 pounds for the aluminum wheel. So I'm going to flash all those numbers on the screen. Let's go ahead and take a new measurement with the same steel wheel and our new 295/70 R18 tires, Toyo Open Countries, At3s. Turn this on. All right, so hopefully you guys can, hopefully that's coming out 00. All right, so we got the tire on. We're not touching it. We're coming in at 95 pounds, 95.1 ounce. We're going to call it 95 pounds. So we're at 95 pounds for this setup out the door. I know the steel wheel weighs 31 pounds. So that gives us 64 pounds for this 295/70 R18, which is pretty dang accurate because the website Discount Tire has it listed at 62 pounds. So, you know, we got a TPMS sensor on there, and we got some air. But let's go ahead and do some initial measurements, and then we'll buzz off one of the 35s and do some similar tests. So this is actually really cool. So it looks like without any weight on the tire, mounted but without any weight, it's coming at 34.25. So 34.25 inches diameter wise, which is really cool because when we put this on the truck, it's probably going to get close to 34, and that means we're going to be really close diameter wise. So in the event that if we ever needed a spare, we could slap this on and we'll be pretty close. The wheels will be spinning pretty close to each other, so less stress on the truck. But that is really good news. That is exactly what I was looking for. So let's go ahead and buzz one of these off, and then we'll give you guys a side-by-side comparison between a 295 and a full 35. All right, we're off the ground. Not going to go any higher than I have to because these things are going to weigh quite a bit. I already know that mounting this back on is going to suck. But let's go ahead and measure these full 35 by 12.5 on our KMC wheels. Now, our KMC wheels come in at about, they're on the heavier end. They come in at about 38 pounds. So let's see, we got double zeros. Okay, we got no weight on the, not touching it. We're at 105 pounds and 6 ounces. I'm going to call it 105. So 105 pounds for this combo, 35 by 12.5 R18s on KMC 18 by 9 wheels. Okay, so a little bit of math. So 105, I know these wheels weigh 38 pounds, which means these 35 by 12.5 R18 tires, Toyo Open Countries, they come in at about 67 pounds, which is not very much different than the 295s over here, right here. So pretty pleased with that number. On Discount Tire, it was showing 75 pounds for these tires, but that was inaccurate because when I checked TireRack.com, it was showing 66 pounds for these tires. So it looks like Tire Rack had it right, but let's go ahead and get a side-by-side comparison and then compare the two tires. All right, so really cool visual for you guys. So we got the 35 by 12.5 R18 on the left, and then we have the 295/70 R18 on the right. Now these are the exact same tire, Toyo Open Country At3s. One's just a 35 and one's a 295/70. As you guys can see, diameter wise, they are really close. Now I took some measurements. I'll go ahead and flash those on the screen maybe. But the 35 by 12.5, it's about a 1/4 inch taller than the 295. I got my level on the two tires, and you can see that level mark. We're talking about splitting hairs here, but that level mark, it's not perfectly center, but if I raise this about a 1/4 inch, just about a 1/4 inch, very lightly, that doohickey will be right in the middle. About a 1/4 inch taller, the 35 compared to the 295. I swear, if a video like this existed when I was shopping for tires, I'd be super happy, I'll tell you that. But as far as width goes, I measured this with the ruler, and it might come off kind of strange on the GoPro because one, I'm using a wide angle lens here, and the sides get a little distorted. But take my word for it, width wise, we're about 12 inches wide on the Toyos. On the 35 by 12.5, it's about 12 inches wide. And on the 295, we're about 10.5. So about 10.5. So you're definitely getting more width, about 1.5 inches with the 35s. And you're also getting about a 1/4 inch higher in diameter compared to the 295s. I also want to preface that, you know, in my 10 years of running off-road tires, I've ran low range C's, D's, and E's, and I have never had a flat tire in 10 years. However, there was one time I did get a flat, and it was a low range E tire, and I was on the trail. Fortunately, I had a spare, so I threw my spare on there and no problem. So although it's very rare to get a flat tire on such a strong tire, they do happen. So It's cheap insurance. I would prefer just to have a full-size spare, you know, in the event that I get stranded on the side of the road or a trail, or it's late. I do a lot of driving, and if something were to happen, I just like the cheap insurance that I have something I can throw on there and I can get to the nearest tire shop, gas station, wherever it may be. Now, can you run a smaller size spare? Like, could I have just stuck with the stock size spare and run that? You know, you probably could. If you were just going a few miles just to get off the highway, you probably could. Is it the healthiest on the truck? Probably not, because the truck has to work a lot harder because you got two different diameters spinning, and it can be hell on a truck. So that is the reason why I opted to get a similar size, full size spare. So now what I'm going to get into is chat about load range, load index. If none of that stuff is important to you, then feel free to shut off the video. But I'm going to nerd out for a little bit based on my previous experience. So the original load index that came on the truck on the OEM tires were a straight rated, SL rated tire with a 116 load index. And I believe with a 116 load index, each tire was rated to carry roughly 2,700 pounds or so. So ideally, when you're swapping out tires, you generally don't want to go lower than what the truck originally came with, because one, you don't want to mess with payload capacity, and so I prefer to go with an equal or higher load range than what the truck came with. So with these tires, these are 35 by 12.5 load range D with the load index of 118. So I know I'm not hurting payload capacity or towing with these tires. I might be a little bit because it's a much heavier setup, so the truck has to work harder to turn these 35s than it had to with the 116. But as far as payload capacity is concerned, I know I'm not affecting those numbers because I know these tires can handle it. So with the load range D, it's a softer tire than the load range E. I could tell right away. As soon as I picked up this tire, it just felt really stiff compared to the load range D. It's just, with the load range D, it gives a lot more compared to load range E. But I needed a spare tire, and they don't make this in a load range D. Anyways, so generally when you go with a heavier load index or heavier load range, you're getting a much stronger, a much stiffer compound tire. The load range D is rated at 8 ply over the OEM stock, which is about a 2 or a 4 ply tire, I believe. Now the load range E, that's rated at a 10 ply tire. It's not necessarily 10 ply, it's just rated at strength-wise a 10 ply tire. So it's a much stronger tire. It's going to be really resistant to punctures and tears, and it's going to really hold up if you're going to do any heavy towing, put a lot of load on it. It's a really strong tire. It's going to hold up. Same with this tire. It's going to hold up really well. It's just a little softer than the load range E. And a very non-scientific test is generally when I mount up tires and I back out of my garage, if I hear the tire sticking and, you know, making that rubbery sticky noise, then I know, cool, it's a softer tire. Sticky, it's soft. It's not going to be super stiff like my experience with a lot of load range E tires. Usually with load range E tires, when I'm backing out of my garage, I don't hear anything. I don't hear any stickiness or hear any, you know, the rubber noise that the tires make. I don't hear that because it's almost like a super hard plastic. It's a stiff tire. So the one thing with the Tundra is that it's a heavier truck. So, you know, maybe if you throw a load range E, it's not going to affect it so much because you got a lot of weight pushing down on the tire, and you won't feel the bumpiness as much as you would, such as like my former vehicle, a Jeep Wrangler. The Jeep doesn't need that high of a load range. Anything higher than a C is just going to be really, really bumpy and really rocky. So that was my one concern when I put on these new tires. I wanted to keep a factory comfortable ride. I know it's not going to be perfect because, you know, you're getting a stronger tire, you have to compromise a little bit. So when I threw these load range Ds on, they felt really good. They feel awesome. They feel super comfortable and not very, very little different than stock. Yes, it's a little more harsh, but overall still a super comfortable ride. If I was going to throw these 295/70R18 on all four corners, I can tell you, actually I can guarantee you it would have been a lot stiffer. And I know from experience that, you know, if their vehicle doesn't need such a high load index range, then generally go for the softer tire if you can. Now, the very hard part about 18-inch wheels is that it's very difficult to find anything other than a load range E. If you drop down to a 17-inch wheel, you can find load range Cs in multiple sizes, but it's really, really difficult to find anything other than a load range E with an 18-inch wheel. So I was very fortunate enough to find these open country At3s. You have to go up to a full 35 by 12.5 because they don't make a load range D in any other size other than the 35 by 12.5. Anyways, that was just some nerdy specs from my previous experience. So I'm hoping this video was beneficial for anyone shopping for these two tire sizes. So this was just my 2 cents. I'm hoping it was helpful. I'm gonna go ahead and mount up my 35 here, and then we'll throw this under the spare compartment. And I'll throw a GoPro down there so you guys can see how that fits down there. Alright, so as far as what a 295 70 R18 looks like as a spare behind the truck, you can barely see it. It's nice and tucked up there. I mean, you can see a part of it. You can see parts of it, but for the most part it's pretty concealed. Okay guys, thank you for watching. I'm hoping this video was helpful for you. So we're almost at 1,000 subscribers, which is really cool. I appreciate the support. I really enjoy making these videos. Stay tuned for the next video. I'll probably go over some recovery gear basics, and then we'll finally take this thing out on a trail.